Ambassador David Richardson walked slowly into the massive crystal building that housed the Galactic Council. The structure stretched up so high he couldn't see the top, and light bounced off its walls in rainbow colors. Around him, hundreds of alien beings spoke in voices that sounded like everything from bird songs to grinding metal. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and a few resembled nothing he'd ever imagined. Richardson kept his hands behind his back and tried to look calm, even though his heart was beating fast. This was humanity's big moment. After decades of being treated like primitive cave dwellers by the galaxy's advanced civilizations, Earth finally had a chance to prove they belonged among the stars. The Valerian ambassador, HFY War, stood at the center of the chamber. His body looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a lobster, with 4 arms and eyes that moved independently. When he spoke, his words came out as sharp clicks and whistles, but a small device on his chest translated everything into the common galactic language. "Look at this pathetic world," HFY War announced, waving one of his clawed hands. A hologram appeared in the air above the assembly, showing Earth from space. The blue and green planet looked beautiful to Richardson, but he knew what was coming next. The image zoomed in to show raging hurricanes, massive tornadoes, and lightning storms that could be seen from orbit. Then came footage of Earth's wildlife: lions hunting zebras, sharks attacking seals, venomous snakes striking their prey. The hologram shifted to show volcanic eruptions, earthquakes splitting the ground, and tsunamis washing away coastlines. "This so-called Earth," HFY War continued, his voice dripping with disgust, "experiences temperature swings that would kill most civilized species. In some places, the air itself freezes solid at -40 degrees. In others, the heat reaches 50 degrees, hot enough to cook flesh. And these are just the normal conditions." Several council members made sounds that Richardson's translator identified as expressions of horror and disbelief. A delegate that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed bright orange, which apparently meant it was shocked. "But the temperature extremes are nothing compared to predators," HFY War went on, clearly enjoying himself. "Creatures with razor-sharp teeth hunt other animals for sport. Microscopic organisms cause deadly diseases. Plants produce toxins that can kill with a single touch. Even the insects carry poisons." The hologram now showed close-ups of bears, tigers, poisonous spiders, and deadly snakes. Richardson had to admit, it looked pretty terrifying when you put it all together like this. He'd grown up on Earth, so he was used to the idea that nature was dangerous, but seeing through alien eyes made him realize just how harsh his home planet really was. "And then there are the natural disasters," HFY War continued. "The very ground moves without warning, swallowing entire cities. Mountains explode, covering vast areas in burning rock. The oceans rise up in walls of water hundreds of feet high. Even the weather tries to kill them with spinning winds that can tear apart buildings." Council member Thale, who looked like a giant purple starfish with tentacles instead of arms, wiggled his appendages in what Richardson had learned was a gesture of contempt. How does such a primitive species even manage to survive on this death world? Richardson had been waiting for this question. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Thale. Adaptability. The word hung in the air for a moment before laughter erupted throughout the chamber. It wasn't the kind of good-natured chuckling you'd hear at a comedy show. This was the cruel laughter of beings who thought they were so much better than the primitive humans from the dangerous world. HFY War's mandibles clicked together rapidly, which Richardson had learned meant he found something extremely amusing. "Adaptability," he repeated mockingly. "The humans think they can adapt their way through anything. How charming." The Valerian ambassador raised his voice to address the entire council. "Based on Earth's clearly barbaric nature and the obvious limitations of its inhabitants, we deny humanity's request for Class A colonial territories." Richardson felt his heart sink. Class A territories were the good planets, world with perfect weather, friendly animals, and soil that could grow anything. These were the colonies that made species rich and powerful. Without access to Class A worlds, humanity would be stuck with the leftovers. But HFY War wasn't finished. "However, we are not entirely without mercy. We offer the humans Kepler 442c. A new hologram appeared, showing a world that looked like something out of a dream. Rolling green hills stretched toward crystal-clear rivers. Two golden suns hung in a perfect blue sky. Gentle creatures that looked like a cross between deer and butterflies moved peacefully through meadows of colorful flowers. Kepler, 442c is what we call a paradise world, Kevvar explained, though his tone suggested this was entirely good news. Perfect weather year-round. No dangerous predators. Beautiful landscapes as far as the eye can see. Our finest colonists attempted to settle there 50 years ago. He paused dramatically. They all died within 2 years. The chamber fell silent. Richardson felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression neutral. Perhaps, Kevvar continued with obvious satisfaction, this assignment will teach your ambitious species some much-needed humility. Richardson knew he was supposed to feel defeated. The entire council expected him to beg for reconsideration or to refuse the assignment altogether. Instead, he found himself thinking about human history. Every time someone had told humans they couldn't do something, they'd found a way to do it anyway. He gave Kevvar a slight nod. We accept. As he spoke those words, Richardson couldn't help but smile just a little. The council thought they were punishing humanity by giving them an impossible challenge. What they'd actually done was hand humans exactly what they needed, a chance to show the galaxy what Earth's children could really do. The Valerians' failure on Kepler, 442c, would become humanity's greatest triumph. Captain Emily Watson felt the warm breeze hit her face as she stepped down from the transport shuttle's ramp. Her boots touched the soft grass of Kepler, 442c for the first time, and she had to admit the planet looked absolutely stunning. The air smelled like flowers and fresh rain, nothing like the recycled atmosphere she'd been breathing for the past 6 months during their journey from Earth. Everything around her seemed too perfect to be real. The grass was the most brilliant green she'd ever seen, stretching out in gentle rolling hills that reminded her of the English countryside where she'd grown up. Crystal-clear streams wound between the hills, their water so pure it looked like liquid diamonds. Above her head, 2 golden suns hung in the sky, so blue it hurt to look at directly. This place makes a Y look like a dump, muttered Lieutenant James Parker as he climbed down behind her, carrying a heavy scanner in one hand and his equipment pack in the other. Parker was a tech specialist from Texas who could fix anything with circuits, but right now he was frowning at his readings like they'd personally insulted his mother. Watson watched as more of her team emerged from the shuttle. 25 of Earth's best and brightest, sent to establish humanity's first colony on what the Galactic Council had called a paradise world. Looking around at the breathtaking scenery, she couldn't understand why the Valerians had failed here. Maybe they just weren't as tough as they thought they were. Captain, we've got a problem, Parker called out, his scanner beeping frantically. The electromagnetic readings are completely insane. I'm talking about levels that would fry most electronic equipment within hours. Watson walked over to look at Parker's scanner. The device was showing numbers that didn't make sense. Are you sure that thing is working right? I ran 3 diagnostics on the way down, Parker replied, shaking the scanner as if that might help. The readings are accurate. This whole planet is like one giant electromagnetic storm, except it's invisible and constant. That explained a few things. Watson remembered reading the Valerian reports about how their advanced technology had mysteriously failed. She'd assumed they were just making excuses for their incompetence, but maybe there was more to it. Dr. Margaret Foster, their chief scientist, was already at work by the nearest stream. Foster had 3 degrees from Cambridge and had spent her career studying hostile environments. If anyone could figure out what made this planet dangerous, it would be her. Watson joined Foster by the water's edge. The stream was maybe 3 feet wide, and so clear she could see smooth stones on the bottom. Small fish that looked like living rainbows swam lazily in the current. Everything about it screamed safe and drinkable. Foster dipped a small testing device into the water and waited for the results. Her expression grew more concerned as the numbers appeared on her screen. Well, the good news is it's definitely water. Pure H2O, cleaner than anything you'd find on most civilized worlds. And the bad news? Watson asked, though she was pretty sure she didn't want to hear it. These mineral traces are unusual. Foster showed Watson her readings. Nothing immediately toxic, but if you drank this water for months or years, It would slowly break down your cells from the inside. Most alien species would die of what looks like rapid aging. Watson felt her stomach drop. What about humans? Foster was quiet for a moment, running more tests. Hard to say. We might handle it better than the Valerians did. Our bodies are used to dealing with all kinds of toxic stuff from Earth. But we'll need to be careful. Captain, called out Dr. Andrew Miller, their agricultural specialist. Miller was kneeling about 50 yards away, digging his hands into the rich-looking soil. You need to see this. Watson and Foster walked over to where Miller was working. He dug a small hole and was examining the dirt with a portable analyzer. The soil looked dark and fertile, the kind that should be able to grow anything. What's the verdict? Watson asked. Miller held up a handful of the beautiful-looking earth. It's like trying to grow food in pure sand. Sure, it looks good, but there's almost no nutrients in it. No nitrogen, no phosphorus, barely any minerals that plants actually need to survive. Foster nodded grimly. That explains why this place looks so perfect. The local plants have evolved to survive on almost nothing, but Earth crops would die here within weeks. So the Valerians starve, Watson realized. They came to paradise and slowly starved to death while their equipment failed around them. As if to prove her point, Parker's scanner chose that moment to start smoking. He cursed and quickly shut it down before it could catch fire. Their goals are a primary electromagnetic detector. This planet is eating our tech faster than I expected. Watson looked around at her team as they set up their temporary camp. The sun was beginning to set, and she had to admit it was the most beautiful sunset she'd ever seen. The twin suns painted the sky in shades of gold and purple that no Earth artist could have imagined. The air was warm and comfortable, with just enough of a breeze to keep things pleasant. But now she understood why this place was called a paradise world that nobody could tame. It wasn't the kind of obvious danger they had on Earth, where predators would eat you or storms would blow you away. This was something much more subtle and much more cruel. Kepler 442c killed you slowly and beautifully. It poisoned you with crystal-clear water while you died of starvation in the middle of plenty. It destroyed your technology while showing you the most gorgeous views in the galaxy. It was paradise for about a week, and then it became a very pretty grave. Ma'am, Parker said quietly as he watched his equipment fail one piece at a time, I'm starting to understand why the Council gave us this assignment. Watson nodded, watching her team work by the light of two setting suns. Paradise indeed, but only if you could survive its subtle cruelty. The question now was whether humans were tough enough to succeed where the mighty Valerians had failed. She had a feeling they were about to find out. 3 months had passed since the humans first set foot on Kepler 442c, and Chief Engineer Robert Collins was finally starting to feel like they might actually survive this place. He stood in what used to be their temporary camp, but was now becoming a real settlement, wiping sweat from his forehead as he made final adjustments to their new power system. Collins had always been good with his hands. Growing up in rural Montana, he'd learned to fix everything from farm tractors to radio equipment when the nearest repair shop was 100 miles away. That skill had served him well in the military, and even better in space. But this planet had tested every trick he'd ever learned. The electromagnetic interference should have killed us by now, he muttered to himself, checking the readings on his jury-rigged monitoring system. When they'd first arrived, the planet's invisible electromagnetic storms had been frying their equipment faster than they could replace it. Standard galactic technology just couldn't handle the constant bombardment of energy that surrounded this world. But Collins had noticed something that reminded him of home. The patterns of electromagnetic activity weren't random. They followed predictable cycles, just like the solar storms that sometimes knocked out power grids back on Earth. And if they were like Earth's solar storms, then maybe your solutions would work here too. Robert, called out Patricia Hayes as she walked up to his workstation. Hayes was their chief geologist, a tough woman from Scotland who'd spent years studying some of the harshest environments on Earth. How's our power situation looking? Collins grinned and gestured toward the collection of metal cages and wire mesh that surrounded their most important equipment. Faraday cages and magnetic shielding, just like we used during solar storms back home. The electromagnetic energy that was destroying our gear is now powering half the colony. Hayes looked impressed as she examined his setup. Collins had essentially turned the planet's greatest weapon against other species into humanity's greatest advantage. The same electromagnetic storms that had killed Valerian technology were now generating more clean energy than they knew what to do with. "Brilliant work," Hayes said, then held up a soil sample she'd been carrying. "I think I figured out our farming problem, too. This mineral deficiency reminds me of the Australian outback. Looks good on the surface, but there's nothing underneath to support real plant life." Collins nodded. He'd grown up helping with his family's farm, and he knew that good-looking soil didn't always mean productive soil. "What's your solution?" "We need to import Earth bacteria," Hayes explained, her excitement obvious. "The local organic matter is just sitting here doing nothing because there are no microorganisms to break it down into proper fertilizer. But if we introduce Earth bacteria, we can essentially teach the soil how to support our crops." It was genius in its simplicity. The Valerians had probably tried to use their advanced hydroponic systems and artificial fertilizers, never thinking that sometimes the old-fashioned way was the best way. Humans had been improving soil with bacteria and compost for thousands of years. Meanwhile, in the colony's medical bay, Dr. Michael Thompson was discovering that Earth's harsh environment had prepared humans for challenges that no other species could handle. Thompson had been a military medic before joining the colonial service, and he'd seen soldiers survive diseases and parasites that would have killed civilians from more comfortable worlds. "The health reports are actually encouraging," Thompson told Colony Administrator Lisa Bennett during their weekly briefing. "We've identified several local parasites and microorganisms, but our immune systems are handling them without any major problems." Bennett looked surprised. "Really? The Valerian reports made it sound like this planet was crawling with deadly organisms." Thompson shrugged. To them, maybe it was, but these local parasites are actually less aggressive than Earth's malaria. Our bodies have been fighting similar organisms for millions of years. What kills other species just makes us a little tired for a few days. It was another example of how Earth's reputation as a death world was actually humanity's greatest strength. While other species had evolved on comfortable planets where diseases were rare and mild, humans had developed immune systems capable of fighting off almost anything. Bennett coordinated all these efforts from her command post, a converted cargo container that served as the colony's nerve center. She'd been a logistics officer in the Earth Defense Force before taking this assignment, and she understood better than anyone how to make limited resources go a long way. "What killed the Valerians is making us stronger," she explained to her department heads during their daily meeting. "Their paradise was designed for a species that never had to fight for survival. They expected everything to be easy. The proof was in the results. Their first harvest had just come in, and the numbers were almost unbelievable. Using Earth bacteria to improve the soil, electromagnetic energy to power their equipment, and good old-fashioned human stubbornness to solve problems as they came up, the colonists had produced more food in 3 months than the Valerians had managed in 2 years. Collins stood at the edge of their growing settlement as the twin suns set on another successful day. Fields of Earth crops stretched toward the horizon, powered by energy systems that turned the planet's greatest threat into its greatest resource. In the distance, he could see construction crews working on permanent buildings using locally manufactured materials. "You know what's funny?" Hayes said, joining him to watch the sunset. "The Galactic Council thought they were punishing us by sending us to a world that defeated their best colonists." Collins chuckled. "Instead, they gave us exactly what we needed, a chance to show the galaxy what humans can do when nobody expects us to succeed." The colony that was supposed to humble humanity was becoming their greatest triumph. 18 months had passed since the first human boots touched the grass of Kepler 442c, and Agricultural Director Andrew Miller could hardly believe what he was looking at. He stood in the middle of what used to be empty rolling hills, now covered with row after row of thriving crops that stretched to the horizon. The morning sun caught the golden wheat swaying in the breeze, mixed with patches of bright green vegetables that looked healthier than anything he'd ever grown back on Earth. Miller had been farming his whole life, first on his family's farm in Iowa, then as an agricultural specialist for various Earth colonies. He'd seen good harvests and bad ones, but nothing had prepared him for what they'd accomplished here on this so-called paradise world that had killed every previous attempt at colonization. Control, this is Miller in Sector 7. He spoke into his comm device, unable to keep the excitement out of his voice. You need to see these numbers. Administrator Lisa Bennett's voice crackled back through the speaker. Go ahead, Andrew. What V we got? Miller looked down at his tablet, still not quite believing the data himself. We're not just self-sufficient anymore. Lisa, we're producing 3 times more food than our population needs. And that's not even counting the pharmaceutical compounds we're extracting from the local plants. The breakthrough had come when Miller realized they didn't need to fight the planet's biology. They needed to work with it. Instead of trying to grow pure Earth crops in alien soil, he'd started experimenting with hybrids that combined Earth hardiness with local plant genetics. The results had been beyond his wildest dreams. The hybrid corn grew twice as tall as their varieties and produced ears that were packed with nutrients. The modified soybeans could survive in soil that would kill normal plants while still providing all the protein humans needed. And the local plants, once they'd been crossbred with Earth varieties, started producing compounds that turned out to have incredible medical properties. The applications for new colonists are stacking up on my desk. Bennett's voice continued to the comm. Every day, I get dozens of requests from families wanting to come here. Word is spreading that we've actually made this place work. Miller grinned as he walked through his fields, checking on crops that shouldn't exist but were thriving anyway. In the distance, he could see the construction crews putting finishing touches on New Birmingham, the city that was rising from what had been empty grassland just a year ago. Construction foreman Daniel Cooper was supervising the installation of the city's main power grid, a system that worked so well with the planet's electromagnetic properties that they were actually selling excess energy to passing trade ships. Cooper had been a construction worker in Detroit before signing up for colonial service, and he'd learned long ago that the best way to build something was to work with your environment instead of against it. Listen up, people. Cooper called out to his crew as they positioned another power conductor. The Valerians tried to fight this world. They brought their fancy technology and expected everything to work the same way it did back home. That's why they're dead and we're building a city. One of the younger workers, a woman named Kelly from Oregon, looked up from her welding. So what's the secret, boss? Cooper pointed to the power grid they were installing. We learned to dance with it instead. See how we're routing these cables? We're following the natural electromagnetic flow patterns instead of trying to block them. The planet wants to give us energy, so we let it. The city of New Birmingham was unlike anything else in the galaxy. Instead of the typical colonial domes or underground bunkers that most species built on hostile worlds, the humans had created a settlement that looked like it had grown naturally from the landscape itself. Buildings curved with the hills, power systems channeled the planet's electromagnetic storms, and the whole city was designed to work in harmony with Kepler, 442C's unique properties. News of humanity's incredible success was spreading throughout the galaxy, though not everyone wanted to believe it. In the crystal chambers of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Kevar was receiving reports that made his mandibles click with irritation. Impossible, Kevar declared to the assembled council members, waving his clawed hands dismissively. These reports must be propaganda designed to make their primitive species look more capable than it actually is. Council member Thal's tentacles writhed with uncertainty, but the shipping manifests fabricated. Kevar interrupted. No species thrives on a world that defeated our finest colonists. The humans are probably eating their emergency rations and making up stories about successful harvests. But the shipping manifests weren't lying, and Kevar knew it. Every week, more cargo ships were leaving Kepler. 442C loaded with surplus food, rare minerals, and pharmaceutical compounds that were commanding premium prices throughout the galaxy. The world that was supposed to humble humanity was rapidly becoming one of the sector's most productive and profitable colonies. Back on Kepler, 442C, Miller stood on a hill overlooking New Birmingham as the twin suns set behind the growing city. The settlement now housed over 5,000 humans, with more arriving every month. The spaceport that started as a single landing pad was now a complex of terminals handling dozens of ships per day. You know what the best part is? Miller said to Bennett as she joined him to watch the sunset. We're not just surviving here. We're actually happy. Bennett nodded, looking out over their thriving colony. The Galactic Council thought they were giving us an impossible challenge. Instead, they gave us a chance to build something amazing. In the distance, children who had been born on Kepler. 442C played in parks that wouldn't have existed without human ingenuity. The paradise world that had killed its previous inhabitants was now home to a civilization that was not just surviving, but flourishing beyond anyone's expectations. The humans had taken their greatest punishment and turned it into their greatest triumph. 2 years after the humans had first landed on Kepler, for 42C, the Galactic Council's inspection fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find the wreckage of another failed colony. Council member Thales sat in his command ship's observation deck, his purple tentacles twitching with what he assumed would be vindicated satisfaction. The humans had been given an impossible task, and now the Council would finally have proof that Earth's so-called adaptability was nothing more than primitive boasting. Approaching the planet now, Counselor, reported his aide, a thin insectoid creature whose translator rendered its buzzing into standard galactic, scanning for human life signs, and wait, that can't be right. Thales' tentacles curled with irritation. What seems to be the problem? Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures, orbital traffic control signals, and multiple cities? The aide's confusion was obvious, even to mechanical translation. This doesn't match our projections at all. As their ship entered Kepler, 442C's atmosphere, Thale pressed his face against a viewport and felt his confidence drain away. Below them stretched a thriving civilization that looked nothing like the desperate survival camp he'd expected to find. A sprawling city covered the rolling hills, its buildings gleaming in the light of the twin suns. Dozens of ships moved between orbital platforms and surface spaceports in organized traffic patterns that spoke of serious commercial activity. Ambassador Richardson was waiting for them at the main spaceport, looking relaxed and confident in a way that made Thale's tentacles writhe with unease. Behind Richardson, human children played in carefully maintained parks, while adults went about their daily business like this was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Welcome to New Birmingham," Richardson said with a smile that didn't quite hide his satisfaction. "I hope you'll find our little colony educational." Kethvar emerged from his transport ship, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he took in the bustling scene around them. The Valerian ambassador had been so certain that the humans would fail spectacularly, but the evidence of their success was impossible to ignore. The spaceport alone was handling more traffic than some established galactic trade hubs. "This is clearly some sort of elaborate deception," Kethvar announced, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Temporary structures designed to fool our inspection team." Richardson chuckled. "Feel free to examine anything you'd like. We have nothing to hide." The inspection tour that followed left the galactic delegation increasingly stunned. Richardson led them through New Birmingham's thriving districts, where humans worked alongside creatures that looked like a cross between deer and butterflies, the same animals that had been described as harmless but useless in the original Valerian reports. "How is this possible?" Thale demanded, his tentacles quivering with disbelief as they watched humans using the local animals to help with construction work. These creatures were supposed to be decorative at best. "Earth taught us that survival isn't about finding perfect conditions," Richardson explained patiently. "It's about adapting to whatever conditions you find. These animals might not be useful for advanced technology, but they're excellent for heavy lifting and have an instinctive understanding of the local electromagnetic patterns." They visited the agricultural zones where Dr. Foster was conducting research on hybrid crops that combined earth hardiness with local plant genetics. The yields were incredible, far beyond what most established agricultural worlds could produce. Foster's team had essentially created a new form of farming that turned the planet's supposed weaknesses into strengths. What you call a paradise planet was simply another environment to understand and work with, Foster explained to the stunned delegation, showing them fields that stretched beyond the horizon. "Our Deathworld gave us tools your species never needed to develop." The electromagnetic storms that had destroyed Valerian technology were now powering the entire colony through an ingenious system of Faraday cages and magnetic collectors. The mineral-poor soil that had starved previous colonists was now supporting crops that were more nutritious than anything grown on most civilized worlds, thanks to carefully introduced earth bacteria that broke down local organic matter into perfect fertilizer. The water that slowly poisoned your people, Richardson continued as they toured the city's processing facilities, turned out to be harmless to humans who grew up drinking from polluted rivers and fighting off diseases that would kill most galactic species within days. Kethvar stood silent as human engineers explained their innovations with obvious pride. Every problem that had defeated the mighty Valerian colonial effort had been solved by humans using techniques learned from their harsh homeworld. They hadn't just survived on Kepler. For 42C, they had transformed it into one of the most productive colonies in the sector. Your electromagnetic interference, Chief Engineer Collins explained cheerfully, reminded us of solar storms back home. Same basic principles, just constant instead of periodic. Once we figured that out, it was like having unlimited clean energy. The agricultural director showed them hybrid plants that shouldn't have been possible. Turns out the local biology was just waiting for someone who understood how to work with difficult growing conditions. We've been doing that on Earth for thousands of years. As the day wore on, the galactic delegation grew quieter and more thoughtful. Every assumption they'd made about human capabilities was being systematically demolished by the evidence in front of them. Children born on Kepler, 442C played in parks that bloomed with flowers from a dozen different worlds. Markets sold goods that were commanding premium prices throughout the galaxy. The spaceport handled cargo ships that came from systems hundreds of light years away. Finally, as the twin suns began to set over New Birmingham, Kethvar spoke into the silence that had fallen over the group. Perhaps we should reconsider what makes a world truly dangerous. Richardson's smile was genuine this time, without the edge of satisfaction it had carried earlier. Or what makes a species truly adaptable? The Galactic Council had sent humans to Kepler, 442C, expecting them to fail and learn humility. Instead, they had learned something far more important about themselves. The Deathworld that forged humanity wasn't their weakness. It was their greatest strength. Every challenge that seemed impossible to civilized species was just another problem to solve for people who had grown up on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. As the inspection fleet prepared to leave, Theo looked back at the thriving human colony with something approaching respect. The Galactic Council would have to revise their understanding of many things, starting with their definition of what made a species capable of true greatness. The humans had taken their punishment and turned into triumph, proving that sometimes the most dangerous worlds produce the most remarkable civilizations.